Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Meredith. I am one of the PFAFF educators here and I'm so excited. This is my very first PFAFF Live. So I'm really excited to be doing this one. The project that we're, not necessarily a project, but what I'm going to be showing you, your own techniques you can use to create your own. So I'm going to give everybody just a second to come on and sit down. If you have any questions, I have a great team in the background, Ryan and Amy, who are here. So send them over those questions and they can send them in to me. Specific things like that. If I don't know it, we'll figure it out for you and we'll come back and answer that later. But I hope you enjoy this. I'm really excited about this one. So we are going to be going through the steps, not necessarily the whole process of this project, but the steps that I have found that work best for me for achieving a good finished result. So it could either be a table runner or a wall hanging with all these decorative stitches and then this quilt block. So I'm sort of going to go through my process. I just sort of created this on a whim a week or so ago, and I just wanted to share with y'all my tips and tricks for doing that so that hopefully y'all can do this also. With Flag Day coming up next week on the 14th, on 4th of July, it's a great opportunity to use up scraps. These were all scraps that I've used even for the binding and the backing, scraps that you have, but then also trying out some of those stitches on your machines. I know a lot of times we aren't always sure where and why to use certain stitches, decorative stitches, so I want to show you some ways you can implement them, not only with this, but other ways as well. So we are going to get going first. I'm going to go through, we're going to start with this quilt block here, how I created it, my whole process for it, so that you can create your own. If you don't necessarily like this quilt block, you can for sure create your own using grid paper, just the way I did. So what I did was I knew that I wanted it to be, my table that I'm going to put it on is about like 16 inches. So I wanted it to be about 12 inches finished height-wise. So what I did was I created I have this little grid paper and I marked off each square is 1 inch. So I did a 12 by 12 block and I sort of had an idea of what kind of block I wanted. And then I just tweaked it a little bit as I went. So I ended up with what you see here, which is this bottom one here. And I'm going to give you all the measurements I used. You're more than welcome to do it yourself as well. Or create your own. I love graph paper and being able to color. As you can tell, I tried a few different ways before I ended up on what I ended up on. So what we're going to start with is snowballing. It's putting two pieces together, but on an angle and then folding it over. So to give you this effect here of these guys, this red one with the two blue on it. So snowballing. So that's what we're going to start with. So these red pieces that you see all the way around, you have 4 of those, and those are going to be, I have it all written down here. Those are going to be 6.5 by 3.5 is what they're going to end up being. So your finished block is actually 12.5 by 12.5 because you have to have your 1/4 inch seam allowance on all the sides to sew it onto something. So we're going to start with that. We're going to start with a 6.5 by 3.5, and then all of the squares that we're going to snowball with, as well as put in those final corners, are 3.5 by 3.5. So, and then on the back side of this one, I have already drawn my diagonal line with my Frixion pen. I love these pens. You just put an iron to it and it will disappear afterwards. So Amy, if you will switch over to my sewing view and I will show y'all
this part. So what we're going to do is I've got my 6.5 by 3.5 and I'm going to lay my 3.5 by 3.5 inch square right along the edge. And we want that diagonal to go inward like this. I mean, I guess either way it would work because we can start with that way. So what we're going to do, and I always, when I snowball, I sort of sew at a scant 1/4 inch. So what that means is it's a little bit shy of a full 1/4 inch. So I don't change the position of my needle or anything. You definitely could, but what I do is, I don't know if you can see, the line that I drew is right underneath the, let me get my little stylus here, right under the edge right here. So I'm just stitching right on the edge of this line that I drew. All it is just a stitch worth over. So what we're going to do, we're just going to start at the point there and just go down. And normally when you would line this up, you would stitch with that line straight in the middle, that opening there. But again, this is my personal preference. You can do it that way. It won't be wrong, but I will show you why I like it this way versus the other way here in a minute. So we're going to sew all the way across. And if you had multiples of these, I would chain piece. So what that means is you can sew off of your fabric here, just pull that up a little bit. And then I would take 2 more pieces. I'm just going to put 2 together to show you. And then just continue sewing. And what you'll just have a little chain that's pieced all these together. So that's what I did with my original one because I needed 4 of these 6.5 by 3.5. So I did 4 edges or 4 angles at a time. So we're going to cut that there. Amy, if you'll switch back over to me, please.
Move this out of the way. So I have a little cutting mat over here. I'm going to cut as we go here. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to show it to you as soon as I get done with it. I have a straight edge ruler and I lined it up. I lined the 1/4 inch. Let me cut this thread off here. The 1/4 inch line of my ruler up with the line that I stitched on. So if you see that there, so you have a 1/4 inch seam right there. And what I'm going to do, I've got a little iron and everything. I've got this whole little setup in the smallest space possible over here, y'all. I'm going to just press this open. And I guess the running debate is, do you press your seams open or do you press them to the side? I would love to hear, there's not a right or a wrong. I would love to hear what you do specifically. I, for the most part, press all to the side and I press to the darker side. With this one, it doesn't necessarily matter. So what I did was I pressed everything to the blue side, which is my darker side. So it's completely up to you. For this block, I did a mix. So I could be getting my hand slapped by those seasoned quilters out there where I mixed some where I opened them up and then some where I pushed to the side, but I'll show you why in a little bit. So you've got one of your sides snowballed right here. We're going to do the other side now. So I've got another one of those 3.5 by 3.5 blocks right here with my line already. Amy, if you'll switch back over here to my machine.
And what we're going to do, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to line it up. Our edges here. We're going to start right there. I'm going to raise this up a little bit. And I love, y'all, that I can hit my presser foot down button one time and it's going to raise up just a little bit so I can make those minuscule adjustments right there. Oh, and then my thread came out. This is what I get for playing around with it to show y'all something. So let's rethread this real quick. I'm kind of glad this happened. I know some people struggle sometimes with threading their machine. So I'm going to show you my little tips for that. So when you thread it, you're also going to want to put the presser foot down. And the reason for that is to get your thread in the tension. Whenever you're threading it before that, you want your presser foot up so that those tension discs are open. But what I'm going to do is there's a little guide underneath here. I put my thread in there and then your needle threader. So I use my middle finger to pull this down right there. And then I use my pointer finger. I wrap around this little metal hook here. And then there's a hook that goes through the eye of the needle and it like hooks down and forward. So as that goes through, what I'm going to do, I'm going to wrap around here and I'm going to come underneath that basically is what I'm doing. I don't know if, and look, I've already caught it. So I'll show you all one more time. And then I'm going to swing back. And as I swing back, I let that go. And there it is. There's my little loop. But let me show you all that one more time. So I'm going to swing up and around just like that. And it's already caught it in there. So as I'm letting this up, you don't want to let it fling up because it will break over time and it'll bend that prong that went through the eye of the needle. There's my little loop back there. So I'm going to slide my thread off here. My loop is still hooked onto that little hook. And there's my loop right there. Super quick and easy. So if you have a machine that has a needle threader, it's definitely worth learning how to use. So let's get back to this. We are going to sew right along the edge here. Again, I'm just a little bit to the right of my line that I drew right there. And we're just going to sew all the way down. I didn't get this one all the way over here, but we're going to adjust it just a little bit. There we go. Just like that, and then cut. And again, if you were chain piecing, you could continue doing however many that you had along there. So Amy, if you'll switch back to me. I'm going to cut this one again, 1/4 inch from the seam that I just sewed. And I'll show you all that, and then I'm going to press it open. So cut that right there, and we're going to press it open that way. And again, I'm going to push my seam towards the darker side that I have there. So any questions on that? That is snowballing ×2. I'm going to show you how to snowball ×4 here in just a second. So there's one of our pieces right there. So if we look back at our block, how quickly I just made these four pieces right there. Super quick, super easy. So again, the red piece, the big piece, was 6.5 by 3.5, and these squares right here were 3.5 by 3.5. So now we're going to create this middle one here. So this is snowballing also, but with 4. So this white piece here is 6.5 by 6.5. I want it to be the entire
space to fill this in here. And then again, these blue are 3.5 by 3.5. So let me show you. I already have 2 of them done, so you can sort of get the idea. I have 2. You can't do 2. You always want to cut and press before you do the one right beside it, but you can do opposite angles. So I've already done opposite angles, and I have pressed to my darker side. And the reason why you do that is if I were to have pressed to my lighter side, I don't know if I'll be able to show you. I'll do it on the next one and I'll show you. You can see it through that. That's the reasoning for why you press to the darker side versus the other side if you're going one way or the other. So what we're going to do, I've got 2 more of those 3.5 by 3.5, and we're going to do the other side. So Amy, if you'll switch back over here.
And all I have selected on my machine is a straight stitch. You can always shorten it if you would like to. For this, I did not. I'm glad I noticed this. My little tail was short there. You can shorten your stitch length if you would like for quilting. I do sometimes. It really just depends on how big my pieces are. So same process here that we were doing on our red ones. I'm just sewing right to the right of that line that I drew. And we're going point to point. And if you have, today I'm using the expression 720, the quilt expression 720. If you have, Amy, if you'll switch back to me. Actually, hold on real quick before you switch. I'm sorry. I'm going to do this other side because I can do both of these sides at the same time and it's not going to interfere with them. So let's do that one real quick. Again, I line up, and normally you wouldn't have the one with the guide on it, but I'm using this one because I'm going to be showing y'all some stuff with this guide here in a second. So again, all the way down. And if you had the creative icon too, you could put your laser on. You wouldn't even have to draw that line. That part of the process of quilting to me takes a little bit of time. Amy, if you'll switch back to me now.
It takes a little bit of time, but if you have a creative icon too, you can turn your laser on and it's going to point from point to point. All you do is make sure that that point is lined up along that laser. Super quick and easy. So let me cut these really quick and press them, and I'll show you. All right, so this is what you would have now before you pressed it. There it goes. And then I'm just going to press them open again to the darker side, so the blue side. You want to stay consistent. So if you start doing it one way, you want to do it that way through the entire process of your quilt block, of your quilt, whatever it is that you're making. Also, another tip, you want to use the same machine. If you start sewing on a machine for a project, you want to finish on that same machine. All machines should technically have the same distance, quarter inch, things like that, but it's not always the case. So when you get done, you end up with this block 6 by 6 now, which is what I needed finished with my 4 snowballs pressed to the wrong side or pressed to the dark side. So there we go. So that is the middle piece of our block here. So you saw how quick and easy I created these 4 blocks already. And then these last 4 here, they're just 3.5 by 3.5 squares. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some of those together, and then I'm going to show you my tips for lining up your seams and your points as well. So let me show you next. We are going to add on, let's do it this way. So we're going to put these 2 pieces together. We want it to be like this when we're done, like that. So my little trick, Amy, if you'll switch to my sewing view.
I take a pin, a straight pin, and what I do is on the back side of one, I put my pin right there at that point where I want it to go. And I learned this trick from my little sewing group that I have. I have a group of ladies that have taken me under their wing over the years and have just really given me a wealth of knowledge through all of them. So my only other thing here is I just leave this pin, because if you flip it in to do that, what it did is it pushed up the front piece higher. So they're not going to be lined up. So I'm going to leave it that way for now. But when we get up here to sewing, I'm going to move it out of the way. And then, so once I'm not going to line up my edges first when I do this, I want to line up those seams first. That's another little tip that I have. Find those matching seams you want, pin there, and then move outward to line up your pieces. So again, we've got our edges lined up. This is where this foot right here, if y'all don't have this foot, it is a 1/4 inch piecing foot with guide. It's got this little metal guide here on the side. It makes the whole process so easy because I'm just going to line up my fabric along the edge right there. There we go. Okay, here we go. So we're going to sew straight through here. So you notice, look at this. Do you see this seam coming up? You don't want these seams to come up. We press them the way that we want them. So if you see your seams popping up over your foot, just stop sewing. And you notice my needle, I stopped with my needle in the down position. So my foot raised up a little bit and I can push that down, or you can raise up one more and really push it down if you can't get it. So we are going to take out that seam right there where we had it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just hold with my pen. You can use a stiletto. You can use your, any of these things to help hold it into place. But this is kind of bulky right here. We want our needle to fall right here in that corner where we would put our pin at. So what we're going to do, and I see a question, give me 1 second here and I'll answer that. What you're going to notice is that bulk wants to push outward. So when I get to these seams, I slow down a little bit. I go a little bit slower and I make sure, look, you see that sort of trying to push that way, the fabric. I want to make sure it stays in place. And my needle, you can't see it. I wish y'all could. My needle is in that V where I had my pin at a minute ago. Because if you sew up too high, you're going to see, let's see if I got it. So we just want to make sure that stays over there and doesn't get pushed to the side because you have that bulk of a few layers of fabric. And then just line up the rest of it and continue sewing off the edge there. And again, if you had multiples of these, you could just chain piece them all together quickly and be done there. So will there be directions for this? Currently, I don't. Amy, if you'll switch back to me. Currently, I don't have directions for this.
But it is something that hopefully I can get done. So there's a lot of changes happening, good things. And so I'm trying to figure out what all I can get done in time for certain things. But yes, that's my hope, is to make it a project. I don't know that it will be out in the next week or so though, but hopefully soon. So it shifted just a little bit, but look at that, y'all. That's not too bad for lining those two seams up there. Super quick, super easy. So I mentioned that, I asked y'all, do you press your seams to the side or do you press them open? And I'm sort of one of those, I normally always press to the side. But this is a lot of bulk right here. If you think about it, there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 layers right there. That's hard to push that all to one side. So when I get really thick areas like this, I'm going to press them open. So that's what I'm going to do really quick. I'll show you all that. That way I'm evenly distributing it. The bulk there if I can get it. Okay. Are there any questions? Are y'all following along? Am I making sense? I hope this is clear to y'all. And you can always come back and watch these. And as you watch it, you can write down the measurements that I give. And I'll give them again towards the end so you've got them all there. So what I did was I pressed that open. And when you do it, you don't want to iron back and forth. When you press, you just press and you lift up your iron. That's all we're going to do. So there we go. Really quick and easy. And my points are lined up by what? A minuscule difference right there. So I'm happy with that. So, and then you would create another one of these pieces with our 2 snowballs, the red with the 2 snowballs, and do it on this side. For time's sake, we're not going to do that today. I'm going to keep on going because I want to show you how you can put the 2 rows together. So take another one of your finished, you should have 4 of these, remember, 6.5, 3.5, 3.5. Take one of these, and then we're going to take our 3.5 by 3.5 and put those together. Those are our top pieces. I'm trying to get it to show y'all. So we've sewn this to this now, and then you would have added another, so you would have this full strip when you're done. Now we're going to take this piece and add on 2 3.5 by 3.5 at the end, and the same for this. I'm just going to do one today just for the sake of time. So Amy, if you'll switch back to my machine view, and I have these lovely white on white stars that I want to make sure I've got the right side facing the right way. So what I did was, again, I just lined up my sides right here.
And this is, again, a preference. This is just my little tip from, a few years of doing quilting and stuff, is I want to sew with this side up, only because I want to keep track of this seam. I want to make sure that if I sew, because if I were to go this way, that seam can get pushed up like that and then sewn in like that. And then that messes up the whole process of making sure your seams are lined up easily. So I'm going to sew with this side up, and I'm going to sew with my seam facing down this way. It doesn't always work out that way, the way you have things folded, but sometimes it works out great. So this is just a quick, easy 1/4 inch seam. Right there, sewing along. And again, if you had more, just chain piece it all together. And there we go, like that. So then when we press this open, you would press it to the darker side, again, this way, like that. So that's what I'm going to do really quick. Amy, if you'll switch back over to me. So I'm just pressing that down there. Did I get that? Oh, on this one side. There we go. And then, again, you would add on another white to the bottom, but I'm just doing a smaller version of it for today to get through this to show y'all. And then you've got your pieces. So imagine you had, that's the wrong, yes, that's the right way. Imagine you had this, another one of these down here, and then another white block at the bottom, but this works out for today. So what you're going to do is you want to find your seams you want to line up. Again, we're not going to line up our ends. You're just, because you're not as likely to get, in a perfect world, you would match up your seams in that way. It doesn't work like that in quilting. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't work like that. So I like to find my hardest seam that I want lined up. So in this case, that would be these points. We want these points lined up. So again, same process. Amy, if you'll switch to my sewing view, I'm going to show you down here. Same process. I'm going to put my needle through that point in the back and then line it up right here as well. Right there. And then just line those up just like that. Really quick and easy. But again, if you pull up like that, what it does is it moves this top one further up. So, but it's okay just to hold in place now. The next one we want to have, so we have seams right here. These are my favorite seams to line up here. So on the back side, because this is where I had that bulk, I have my seams pressed open, but on this side, I just have it to the side. So what you're going to do is you're going to just line up those seams right there and pin it in place. Let's take another pin and pin that in place just like that. And then you would line the rest of this up, and that's where you would start right there. So again, in a perfect world, you could just line up your points at the end and it would all line up. It doesn't always work like that. So what we're going to do, we're going to sew. Oh, hold on. I got some on the side there. There we go. Just like that. We're going to go all the way down. I'm not going to sew over my pins. So when you get to here, on this back side, if we had pressed to the opposite direction, which is normally what you would do, but on this one, I have it pressed open, you would worry about that seam pushing the wrong way. So we just want to make sure that our seam is open flat on the back, the way we have it, the way we had pressed it. And we're going to sew up just a little bit there. And then I take that pin out. You never want to sew over a pin. As you keep going, you want to make sure that your edges, your raw edges are lined up. And keep on going. And we're getting up to this, so I'm going to just move it over here. And I've got it lined up. And again, we're making sure our seam is down here. I don't want to do too much movement here because I don't want to lose that spot, but right there. And we want to make sure that that needle goes right into that point where we had our pin. And it doesn't shift, just like that. And then you just line up your edges the rest of the way. Quilt blocks can be very forgiving sometimes. It just depends on the style of block that you're doing. So just like that. And look, I've got my points lined up and I have my 4 corners lined up, y'all. Love it. Super quick, super easy. So Amy, if you'll switch back to me. And you would press your seam. And again, here's 1/4 of that block. Super quick, super easy. So I'll say it one more time. So if you are watching this now, or if you would like to, if you rewatch it and are looking for the measurements,
This is a 12.5 by 12.5 inch block finished. Here, I've got one finished already just to show you. Finished like this. This middle white piece is 6.5 by 6.5. You need 4 blocks that are 3.5 by 3.5. These red pieces on the side are 6.5 by 3.5, along with 8 3.5 by 3.5 inch blocks. So like for this one, I did different, you can tell. So if you wanted to do the same for this one, I was going with the same. So you would have 12 3.5 by 3.5 inch blocks is what your total would be. And then you would have your 4 corners, which are also 3.5 by 3.5. So all it is 6.5 by 3.5 inch in some variation there. So there you have it. Super quick, super easy. So now we're going to go through stitch in the ditch. So for the one that I did on my little runner wall hanging here, I did stitch in the ditch on it. You could have added an embroidery. If you have an embroidery design, you could add USA, you could add your monogram, something like that, a little design. That would have been really neat, especially in the corners, things like that. You can stitch out. I sometimes will quilt 1/4 of an inch out on each side of my seam. There's so many different variations you could do for this. The possibilities are endless. It's a great opportunity to try something you haven't done or you've been wanting to try, and it be in a smaller format for you to just get it done as a project. So next what we're going to do is stitch in the ditch. So I already have my quilt sandwich here for my block, and this is the same process that I did when I had it all together. I have my block finished, I have batting, and then I have my backing piece. And I have sprayed these to each other so that it all sticks together here. And we're just going to stitch in the ditch. What I found is starting from the middle and working your way out is best, but that can be hard when you have angles like this. So what I would suggest is we are going to do our cross pieces first, and then you would do your angles, or your angles and then your cross pieces. Don't work your way around doing them, because everything will sort of, we have it all basted together, but it can shift. So I always just suggest working from the middle out. So we're just going to do a couple of these today. I'm going to give you my little tips and tricks for doing stitch in the ditch. So Amy, if you'll switch to me
or to my sewing view, we actually have a stitch in the ditch foot with this little guide in the middle here, and that helps keep your seam. You keep your seam in the middle of that guide, and that's where your stitches go. You can use, I just pulled my thread out there. You'll get to watch me do this again. You can use invisible thread on top. I've done that before, where I've done invisible thread on top and then you put regular thread in the bobbin. You can do something different on top. When you do stitch in the ditch, you really should use something that's matching or the clear invisible thread. And you can get that at your local craft store also. So for this one, I've just got white thread on it here. So we're going to start with our, if I can get that, there you go, our seams here going down. So we're going to line this up right there. And our guide that we have in the middle of our foot is lined up in that seam. And I'm going to make sure my needle goes right down in the middle of the seam at the end there. And then what we're going to do, and this foot also has the IDT engaged. So if your machine does not have the IDT, I believe most of them do. Yep. Amy, I just looked up and Amy said mention IDT. I'm glad I said that. Amy, I'm not sure which machines don't have it, but the majority of the PFAFF machines do have this IDT that engages back here. And then what that does is it's basically a walking foot that grabs the top of the fabric and moves it along in an even sandwich. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm bumping my camera. In an even sandwich, the same way that the feed dogs on the bottom do. So it's keeping that sandwich all together. So what we're going to do, and when you're doing this for the first time, go slow. Watch it. What you want to focus on is the little guide right here. Don't pay attention to the needle, because you've already made sure, if you're watching right here, that that the needle will land in that seam. So just like that. And if you can see on the back, this little IDT is working hard and keeping my quilt sandwich all together. So just like that. Let me finish this one and I will show you what this looks like. And then you can cut. So I normally do this with my batting too. I just got ahead of myself when I was doing this. I normally have my batting and my back piece bigger than my front piece. And once I quilt it, then I cut it down. Because if you make it the exact same size and you don't get it lined up right, you're going to end up with your backing being skewed or something like that. So with this, I just have like an inch bigger than my main block piece so that when I'm done, then I can square it all up. But if you look right here, see if I can get this closer for you guys. My stitching is right there in my seam. And so you really can't see it unless you're looking up close. But super easy. So let's do one more. I'll show you. I'm going to do an angle. Again, normally you would do, all of your straights, and then your angle would be my suggestion, but we're going to do an angle so I can show you one of them. I want to find one across the way. All right. So again, we're going to make sure that our needle, and you could always lower your needle down just to make sure it's going where it's supposed to go. Line up this guide in between your two seams, and you just sew along. Super quick, super easy. So if you wanted to do seams that were a 1/4 inch off, you could get your 1/4 inch foot back on. And what you would do is you would line up the guide for the 1/4 inch foot in the seam, and it would be off, it would be here, and your needle, your guide would be over here, and your needle would still be there. So it would be a 1/4 inch over like that. So super easy. And this is all, y'all, I'm doing this all on the Quilt Expression 720. So it's not an embroidery machine. It's not a super fancy machine, but it does everything that I need. So easy. My stitching's right there in that seam. So Amy, if you'll switch back to me.
Any questions on that so far? I hope you are all following along, that you're enjoying this so far. So again, finished block is 12.5 by 12.5. I sandwiched it all together. Once I'm done quilting it, then I would go and I would square up and cut off this excess fabric that I have here, and I would have a finished piece here. So next we're going to go to how I decorated my stripes on it. So we did our block here, and then we did the stripes. Let me mention though one thing. I finished the entire block. I sewed all my strips together and did that before I did the quilting. But for the purposes of today, I had it like this. So I'll go through that again at the end, how I put it all together and then quilted it, because I did some stitch in the ditch on here too. But this is another great opportunity. I'm going to pull this part back so you can see, to try out some of those decorative stitches you have. I keep wanting to turn it the wrong way so y'all can see. To try out some of those decorative stitches. So I have ribbon stitches. I have programmed words here. I have God Bless America. I just have a regular stitch here. I have floating stitches. And then I have stacking stitches, and then just USA with a star. So super quick, super easy. And we're going to go through some of these. So today we are going to start with floating stitches. So floating stitches, Amy, it'll probably be easier to see down here.
Let me get a drink really quick too, y'all. Okay, so floating stitches are exactly what they sound like. They float on top of your fabric. So you don't have a seam between each of the stitches. So just like that. They just sit on top like that. There's so many different floating stitches, and I'm going to show you some of my tips and tricks for doing them. So what we're going to do first, let me get some of my fabric here. We're going to do it with this red one today. I'm going to switch. When you do decorative stitching, you can do embroidery thread. So I am going to switch to embroidery thread for today. I'm going to do a blue, and I practiced a bunch of these beforehand. Oh, I just dropped my, hold on a second. I practiced these beforehand on scrap fabric that I was going to be using, because I wanted to see what the stitches looked like on the fabric to make sure they would stand out. You wouldn't obviously want to do you could, but you probably don't want to do a red thread on a red fabric. So a white or a blue thread is always great to use on a red fabric if you're doing something red, white, and blue in that way. So I'm switching to a blue embroidery thread. I'm going to thread this here, not bump my machine. Sorry, y'all. We're going to, remember, see my presser foot's up. We're going to put it down now. I've got tension, and then we're going to thread. And again, we're not going to let this needle threader fling up, because that hook that goes through the eye of the needle is very fine and can easily bend over time as it's pulling out of the eye of the needle. So again, super slow when you're doing that, just like that. So there's two ways you can do floating stitches. Amy, if you will switch to my screen view, I'm going to show them some of the floating stitches here. Done with this one. Where did I put? I had my stylus a minute ago. Oh, there it is. So I could not have my finger in the way for y'all to see this. So for stitches, we're going to come right up here again. I'm on the Quilt Expression 720, and you can sit here and, you know, feed through all the stitches if you want, or if you click on the circle right there, you can get to the categories of stitches and see what kind of stitches are underneath them. So all right here, needle art stitches, satin stitches, decorative stitches. We're going to go over one more, two more, one more. Stitch techniques. So there are 4 exclusive PFAFF stitch techniques that are on the 720, and these stitches are also on the Quilt Expression, the performance. Oh, let me start over, y'all. Amy, switch to me really quick so I can say this.
I'm looking at the screen and trying to do it. So there's 4 PFAFF exclusive stitches that come specifically on the 720. There are some more, but specifically for the 720, the performance icon, the creative icon, and the creative icon 2. You have ribbon stitches, which is I'm going to show you, floating stitches, stacking stitches, and maxi stitches. I'm not going to do a maxi stitch today, but the other 3 are what I did on this today. So those come on this PFAFF Quilt Expression 720. So let's go back to the screen here.
So we have ribbon stitches, which I'm not going to show you right now. We have stacking stitches, floating stitches. We're going to go to floating stitches. So I didn't have to sit here and feed through all of these. It just brought me right to the ones that were there. If there were more options, I would scroll down, but it takes me into another. So on my project, what I did, or on my runner, I used number 10, and then did I do the diamond? I did the diamond. So that one right there, number 4. And a tip that I learned from somebody is you can change the density of it. I love these stitches and I want to make them a little bit denser. So if you tap on the center circles, you can change what you're adjusting. So right here we have our stitch width, and then our stitch, Amy, tell me again, what is this? Oh, I'm sorry. This is your stitch length. That's what it is. I'm sorry, I'm losing my mind today, y'all. But if we toggle back, we can change our stitch density. So watch these diamonds as I go up. You see how it makes them a little bit more spaced out and not as dense, but you can go smaller and make them more dense. I don't always like to go super dense all the way down because I feel like it stitches on top of itself. But so, and another little tip, you notice how this is white right here? If I were to change that, the white is the default setting, and then I know that I can get back to whatever it was. So I'm going to just go down 1 to 0.2 density right there, and that's what we're going to do first. So Amy, if you'll switch back to my needle view, there's 2 ways you can do stacking stitches. You can fold your fabric like this, and you just finger press it here. And I need to change my foot. So we're going to change it to this foot right here. And again, it has the little guide flange in the middle. And I can still have my IDT engaged. And the reason we have that flange in the middle is we are going to line up our fabric. I'm going to get stabilizer here in a second before y'all paint it because I'm not using stabilizer. You're going to line your fabric up right there with that flange. So I'm going to take a piece of stabilizer, and you can use tearaway, you can use no-show mesh, you can, really any type of stabilizer is fine. And here's what we're going to do. So we've got our fabric lined up. We want to make sure that that needle is going just to the right of our fabric, because if you stitch into the fabric, then it defeats the purpose of a floating stitch. You're going to see that stitch. So I'm going to slow my machine down a little bit, and I'm going to hit start stop. You can definitely sew with your press or with your foot pedal. But when I want to focus on these stitches, I kind of want to just focus on them and not worry about the speed that I'm going. So I will hit the start stop, and you can see that it's made them extra dense right there. So I'm going to stop after this one here in a second. And then I'm going to show you what one would look like if we heightened or lowered the density of it. Oh, is it going to stop? There it goes. So I wanted to finish at a beginning one, but we'll sew. So I'm going to go back over to my density, and Amy, it's all right. You don't have to switch. I'm just going to change it to 0.7 for my density. And then we're going to hit start again. So you'll be able to see the difference. Finish the stitch here. Now you can see that I don't have as dense of a stitch. So I love that you can take a stitch and change it in multiple ways. You can even make it smaller. You could make it wider to an extent. So keep that in mind as well. These stitches, you can alter them in so many ways. So then what you would do, so again, we just sewed on the stabilizer and half of our fabric. Then what we're going to do, let me get this thread out of the way. We're going to just open these up. Just like that. Look at that. And you can take your iron to that center seam and it'll press out there. Just work it out a little bit. And look at that. So we have our 0.2 density, and then we have 0.7 density. So if you wanted something a little bit not as thick and full, you could definitely alter and change it in so many ways. So I think that's pretty cool. So that's one way you can do floating stitches. I debated when I was making this table runner if I wanted to do my floating stitches between my two seams, and I decided against it just because I just did. But I want to show you it's another option you have. So what you would do, the same thing, if you had folded your fabric in half, you've got your two seams. We're going to line up our two edges here, just like that. And I'm going to take this stabilizer I have on here. Hold on a second. And use it because we still need stabilizer because we're going to stitch on only half of our fabric. You can line it up right there, and then we got our stabilizer. So we have our fabric edges lined up, and then it's lined up on the guide here, and then we're going to hit start. I'm going to go back to a normal density. So that was 0.3. And then we're just going to hit start. Oh, and I lost my thread because I cut it too short. Just a second, y'all. Y'all are just getting loads of opportunities to watch me thread this machine today. So again, my presser foot's up until I come all the way back down. Then I'm going to put my presser foot down, get the thread in the guide, come down and thread it. Super quick and easy. Just like that. Okay, let's do this again. So again, I've got my fabric lined up. I'm going to put my stabilizer underneath and line up my fabric with the edge of the guide there. I'm going to let this do a few of these, and then I'm going to show you what that looks like. So it gives another effect. You would still have sort of a raw edge. So depending on what kind of fabric you're using, you might have to worry about fraying. If it's a high fray fabric, I definitely wouldn't be doing this type of technique with it. I would do more of the first one that I showed you. And then let's open that up and look. So just stitch right there. And then we just pull it open. Look at that. So same technique, but a different way to use it. So lots of different options. Try them out, see which ones you like best, and go from there. So any questions on floating stitches before I switch to ribbon stitches? Some of my favorites, and I know some of our PFAFF regulars are familiar with the float or with the ribbon stitches. All right, so for the ribbon stitch, sorry, I was getting a drink really quick. Amy, if you'll switch to my screen view, thank you. I can't think of the word that I want to call it, my screen view. And then what we're going to do, did I lose it again? I did. I don't know how it keeps dropping on the ground, y'all, when I don't have any fabric down here, but it does. So we're going to do ribbon stitches. So again, we're going to hit our stitch menu up here. We're going to hit right here, and ribbon stitches are right there under menu number 8, ribbon stitches. And you'll notice that I actually have some more options for ribbon stitches. You have single ribbon stitches, which are 1 through 6. You have double ribbon stitches, which are 7 through 12. And then you have triple. I'm going to show you single and double today. What foot did you use for the floating stitches? So the foot that I have is just, it's the, oh, let me switch over here. It's the center guide right there is what it is with the full opening. Amy, do you know the name of it right now? I don't have the package on me, so I don't want to say it incorrectly in the wrong way. I want to make sure I say it right. So, but it's got the full opening with the guide in the middle right there. So Amy will get that for us, and then I'll let you know. Okay, so we're going to start with a single ribbon stitch. So I liked this one up here. Look at this one right here. I don't know if you can tell. That's a little person hanging off the edge right there. But I was thinking when I was doing this, when I was doing some test outs, I'm like, it's 4th of July, Flag Day, fireworks. So I wanted something that sort of looked like fireworks. So I had looked at this stitch right here. So, and it tells me I want to use the 2A foot, which I have right here. I'm going to put that on. Amy, if you will switch to my And I'm not engaged the IDT with this one, which is okay. So we're going to disengage that, and I'm going to have, oh, I'm sorry. There you go. And I just put that on there. I've got my 2A foot on there. And I have some lined fabric to make this easy. And this is really going to matter when it gets to the floating stitches, why I have these lines the way I do, but we're going to use them for this one too today. So when you start, again, I've got embroidery thread on there. You could use regular sewing thread, but it's more of a decorative stitch. So I'm going to use embroidery thread. I'm going to put my needle down in that little, I don't know if you can tell, in the cross hatch right there. So I have my straight lines that go horizontal and vertical. I have it lined up right there in the middle. And then what we're going to do, start and stop is going to be your best friend. Amy said it's a narrow edge foot for IDT. That's what that foot was for the floating stitches. Narrow edge foot for IDT system. Thank you, Amy. So for this one, I just have the 2A foot on. When you do ribbon stitches, you want to do the start and stop button. Just flat out, that's what you want to do. So you can always slow down your speed if you want to, but 100%, I want to suggest to you to use the start and stop. So I'm going to hit start. We're not going to, oh, y'all, what is going on today? Why do I keep losing? But this is good because I can show you something too. There is a button, if I can get this up there. Got a camera in my way, sorry. There is a button on your machine. If you start a stitch and your thread comes out or your bobbin thread's not right or something like that, there's a stitch on your machine that, Amy, if you'll switch back super quick, I'm sorry. There's this button right here, this little triangle with a little line. We're going to hit that and it starts it all over. So if you notice, that little green plus sign moved and it went back to where we were starting. So I don't have to start where I ended, I get to start fresh. So, and I'm going to make sure that when I do this, these are side motion stitches. We want to make sure that this line that we drew here is staying vertical the entire time. We don't want it to become askew or anything like that. So the reason we hit start and stop is because it's going to stop and tell me, it's not going to tell me, but I know I need to put my ribbon down now. So I'm going to take the end of one of my ribbons and we're going to line it this way. I don't know which angle you would like to call this, but this way right here. And then we're going to hit start and stop again. And all I did was I put my thread up against the needle at that angle. And as I'm doing this, I'm making sure that this line is staying vertical so that I don't have a wonky stitch. And what you want to pay attention to is when it crosses back into the middle, that it's still a straight. So now it's stopped again. I'm going to fold my ribbon over. What I'm going to do is I'm not just going to slide it under like this. You don't want it to be, see, I can't even make it do it. You don't want it to be like this where it like loops around. What you want to do is you want to fold it over like that so that it hides those stitches, that angle stitch that it went down with. So again, I've got my ribbon lined up against my needle here, and then I'm not pulling this. You don't want to pull this. You see how if you pull this, it pulls up your fabric and then it's going to pucker your fabric. You want to make sure that it's just flat and smooth, just laying there, no tension on it or anything like that. And then you're going to hit start and stop, and it's going to keep on going. And we're going to do a few more so y'all can see me do that, and then we'll switch to a double ribbon one, which is what I used on the runner that I made for today. So it stopped, and again, I'm going to fold over my ribbon, come underneath. You can always raise up your foot a little bit more too if you can't get your ribbon underneath your presser foot, just like that. We're not pulling tension on it, and it's butted up against my needle. Hit start and stop. Keep on going. We're going to do one more. And so play with some of these ribbon stitches. Find some that you like and do them along the long pieces of your table runner. So fold over, under your foot, up against the needle, and go there. And we're going to stop after this one here. So you can even tell I'm a smidgen off of where my line is, but not enough to make a big difference. So there you go. There is a single ribbon stitch. And there's lots of ones to play with, so try them out, see what works best for you. If you forget what order or like how to fold it, check in your manual. Your manual is a great resource and will have all the instructions for doing these types of stitches and which way your ribbon should go. So we're going to cut our ribbon here. and do the next one. So now I'm going to do a double ribbon stitch. So Amy, if you'll switch back to my machine screen view. So I'm going to go back to my stitches here and find a double one. The one that I did on my runner was this one right here. So we're just going to do that one today because I just liked the little edge off that it had there. So again, Amy, if you'll switch back to my needle view. Okay, so we're not going to put ribbon down yet. We're going to make sure that our needle lines up at that crosshatch right there. So put it down in there and then put your presser foot down. I have stabilizer underneath here. And on your machine, it tells you should use stabilizer also. And then we're going to hit start, stop. And this first one that we're going to do is going to go this way this time. So I got a pile of ribbon over here that I've been playing with. So we're going to take our ribbon, put it underneath right here at this angle. So we started out the other one this way. Now we're going to go this way with this one. And we're going to hit start, stop. And when you first put a ribbon on, you might have to hold that top piece so that it stays in place, and that's okay. So then it's going to stop right there. And we're going to take our second ribbon now. So we're not using the same ribbon. We're going to take our second ribbon and we're going to put it under crossway right there. And I'm going to hold that back piece so it doesn't slide on me. And just like that. And so this is where people get sort of confused. You would think that you would start with this one and come back over, but that's not the case. We are going to take our blue one again, the one we just did, fold it over, not just sliding it under, but folding the ribbon over. So when you're choosing ribbon for the ribbon stitches, you want to make sure that there's not a right and a wrong to the ribbon because you are flipping it back and forth and you will only see the right side half the time. So I have my blue ribbon folded under, not pulling it to where it's pulling up the fabric or anything. We're going to hit start and go. And something you can pay attention to is there's a V where this stitch lines up, and you can just keep making sure that that V, when it crosses over, is lined up with your center line there, just so you know you're on a straight line. So now we're going to take our red ribbon and we're going to fold it over, put our foot down, make sure we're lined up just like that, hit start and stop. And again, same thing. We're going to take our red one again. So you're touching each ribbon twice, and then you're switching to the next one. It's not switching back and forth between your ribbons each time. So now we're touching the blue ribbon over, and then we're going to do it again with the blue. I hope this is making sense. If there's any questions on this, please let me know. But I hope that I've been clear with how to do this. So folding it over, under the foot, just lining it up against the needle, start, stop. Just like that. So now we're touching the red ribbon once, under. I'm going to do this one more time. And red ribbon again, back under. Just like that. Super easy. I'm going to do this one and then we'll stop it. So I finish with a crossover. And look, I'm stopped right in the middle of my line. So what's great about these stitches is people always worry that they're going to get offline, but you're starting and stopping so much that you have a fail safe to make sure each time you stop, your needle is, or your V or whatever the alignment stitch is for the stitch you're using is always lined up with that center. So you can adjust your fabric a little bit if you need to, left or right. So there's a double one. Check that out, y'all. Super quick, super easy. And that's what I did 2 rows of on there as well. Okay, so we are going to switch to, y'all, I didn't think I was going to have enough content to fill this live, but we are running out of time. I hope you don't mind hanging with me for a few more minutes. I'm going to show you, I believe, one more stitch here. So we're going to do stacking stitches now, stacking stitches. So Amy, if you'll switch over to my machine screen view, we're going to come back over here to our stitches right here and find stacking thankfully, all of the ones I'm doing today are all with under category 8. But the you have maxi letter stitches, and then if you switch to, oh, right there, number 5, category 5 decorative stitches, you're going to get the maxi art stitches. That's where those are going to be, and those are the wide stitches that you have. So we're not going to do any of those today. We are just going to do stacking stitches now. And my little tip and trick for lining these up is what I'm going to show you. So when I did my runner, I'll show it to you again in a minute, I used these 2 stitches right here. They all go in 2s. I'm sure you could mix and mingle them. I just sort of keep them with their 2. So like 1 and 2 go together, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, so forth. So I did 15 and 16 on my runner, but I want to show you guys this little mushroom and grass. I just think it's the cutest thing also. So we're going to use our 2A foot, which we already have on, and stabilizer. So Amy, if you'll switch back to my needle view. So I've got stabilizer under here. So this is where it really matters, these vertical line or horizontal lines that I have lined up with a vertical, because we're doing 2 stitches. We want to start in the same spot both times to make sure they're all lined up well. So I've got stabilizer behind it. I'm actually gonna switch to the grass first because I want to do the mushroom in red. So I haven't found that it necessarily matters if you do 1 before 2 or if you do 2 before 1 when you have the 2 stitches together. So they're going to overlap regardless. So what I want to do is I want to lower my needle into that point, that intersection that I had there for the start of this. And then that's where I will also lower my needle in for the second stitch. So we're going to do the grass first with a blue thread. And we're going to hit start and stop. And for this one, I'm keeping this line that I have that I've made lined up with that red line on my foot. And we're just stitching grass here. And this one doesn't move left or right. This one stays in place. So then we're going to stop. Super quick grass, very easy. And now we're going to switch threads. So there's my grass, and I'm going to switch to my red thread, and then I'm going to go back and select the mushroom stitch to go over top of it. When I saw this mushroom stitch, I was just like, this is the cutest little thing ever. So let's thread our, and I'm using embroidery threads still. Just like that. And so now what we're going to do, we're going to switch stitches. Amy, you don't have to switch over there. I'm just going to do it real quick. And I'm going to lower my needle down into where I started. Again, that crosshatch where I have my vertical and horizontal intersection, because the mushrooms are going to line up along the same line. So let's do some of these mushrooms. So this is just, find a quick and easy project like a table runner or a pillow cover that you could do strips of fabric on and add decorative stitching to. I mean, there's so many different options that you have. You could do, Amy had mentioned a rail fence. You could do a rail fence and do something different on each of those strips of fabric to create a pillow cover, another quilt block, so many options and variations. So I'm going to hit my scissors so that at the end of this stitch, it stops. And look, I just happen to stop at the same spot. Perfect. And so here you have it. You have mushrooms and grass. I just think this is the cutest thing ever. So cute. So I want to show you also the one more stacking stitch, because with this one, the fabric didn't move left and right. It just stayed in place. Really easy just to line up that line with the guide on our foot, but not all the stitches are like that. So I'm going to go to the stitch. Amy, you don't have to switch. It's all right. I'm going to go to the stitch that I actually did on my my strip that I made. And this time it tells me it wants me to use the 8 stitch. So this is our bigger, for like the maxi stitches, those wide stitches. This is the foot you're going to use. So same thing again, I'm going to lower my needle into that cross point, press your foot down and hit start and stop. So it's going to do these little swirls here. And as it goes, I'm just making sure that whatever line, oh, did I run out of bobbin? Or did I not pick it back up? Let's see. I don't have my bobbin thread. Let's see here. While I've got it, let me just switch it while we're here. There we go. That way I don't have to worry about running out. All right. So same thing. I'm going to start over. So I'm going to hit that little triangle to the left button that I showed you a minute ago, and it's going to start the stitch completely over. There it goes. So again, we're just making sure that our line that we drew is staying vertical and not turning at an angle. Nothing crazy. I'm going to do 2 or 3 of these, and then we'll switch over to the other stitch. We're just about at overtime, but we're almost done. If y'all have any questions before we get to the end of this, now would be the time to ask. Amy, if you want to send me the next Facebook Lives, I can go ahead and announce those as well while we're doing this. I'm going to stop at the end of this stitch. We have another My Sewnet and PFAFF Live coming up this month that we want to make sure you know about. So there's one stitch, and now I'm going to switch to the other stitch that goes with it. And I'm going to switch my thread this time so that you see the difference. You could definitely keep the same thread, and it wouldn't necessarily matter. It would give a tone-on-tone effect. So the next PFAFF Facebook Live is going to be Thursday, June 22nd with Mickey at 2 p.m. Central. She is going to be showing you how to make bowl covers, like food bowl covers, with it being summertime. Oh my goodness, what am I doing? Summertime and picnics, things like that. Backyard barbecues, those pesky flies, they get in the way. And so she's going to be showing you how to make a cover to keep them away. So again, we're going to start with our needle, same spot so that our stitches are lined up. I know I'm being repetitive here, but it does make a difference because then your stitches won't, that straight line that this one's going to make won't be lined up. And then our next My Sewnet Facebook Live, I'm trying to make sure my lines are lined up and then read Amy's comments also, is next Wednesday. And that is going to be with Kathy Fromm at 2 p.m. Central. She is going to learn more about the Endless and Encore feature. So if you have been wanting to learn more about that, or just to learn some extra new tips and tricks that you may not have or that you may not know, Kathy's got some great information to share with you. Can you use different weight threads? So yes, so I'm using embroidery thread for this one. You could use a heavier weight thread. Just keep in mind you would need to change your needle. Thread and the fabric you're using all depend on the needle as well. So I'm going to finish this stitch out here and then stop. And I'll show you that I don't have it necessarily lined up, but when I put an iron to this, that'll all disappear anyway. So there you go. There's a stacking stitch. So that's the one that I did on my runner. So Amy, if you will switch back to me, I'm going to go through more time to show them or to go over the measurements and things like that I use. So for this one, I had 4 strips. And if my block was 12.5 by 12.5 or 12 by 12 finished, 12.5 by 12.5 before I get finished, I need my strips to be 3.5 by however long you want them to be. Mine was 30 inches. You could do them shorter. You could do them longer. You could do smaller ones. It's completely up to you. But for one of them, I just did ribbon stitches all the way down. For this one, I did some words. I did God Bless America and a star, and then this little decorative stitch, and then floating stitches. Here's that stacking stitch that I just did, as well as another USA with a star. So I had 4 of these, 3.5 by 30. I did my stitching on them first before I sewed them together. Then I sewed them all together with a 1/4 inch seam. So going back to what I went over in the beginning, 1/4 inch seams, super quick and easy. I pressed them all to the red. So with the whites, you don't see any of my seams on the white. They're all pressed to the red. And then what I did was I sewed this block that I had to my strips that were already sewn together. Keep in mind, don't make my mistake, because I did do this. This is what I get for doing it late at night.
I had sewn my strips upside down. And if you didn't do anything with words, it wouldn't necessarily matter. But I did do words, and I didn't want my flag to be backwards. I'm not sure which way it is backwards or if it's not to you guys when you're looking at it. But that's what I did. And then what I did was I pressed all that out. So I've got my block and my strips all sewn together. I laid out batting that was the length that I needed. It's a little bit bigger so that it fit all around the edges. And I did my backing. So I spray basted those together. I've got my backing on it, my batting, wrong side up for your batting. You want the right side out, batting, and then my strip flag that I made. I sandwiched that all together. And that's when I did the stitch in the ditch that I showed you earlier. I stitched in the ditch in the middle right here first, that seam, and then I went down my strips. I didn't come in on my strips. I went outward with them. You always sort of want to sew outward with your seams if possible. And then that's when I did my stitch in the ditch around my block. Once that was done, I squared up my entire piece, my entire sandwich, squared it all up, and then I did binding. Y'all, if you do not have I wanted to get to that today, but I just knew it wasn't going to have time to get to the quilt binder. If you do not have the original quilt binder or the 5/8 inch quilt binder, it is a lifesaver. I was able to easily, and I got all my seams or all of my corners lined up. It does take some practice. Have patience, have grace for yourself. You can get it. I've mastered it just because I've done so many of these lives doing it that I've pat myself on the back, but knock on wood, I don't mess up my next one. I have gotten better at it. So just practice it. Watch the videos we have. There's other videos out there, things like that you can watch from our other educators to show you how to use the quilt binder. And then I finished it like that. So now it is ready to go lay on my little couch table that I have for Flag Day coming up on 4th of July. It's something good I can keep out through the summer. So if there's not any other questions, I want to thank you for joining me today. I really enjoyed doing this, and I hope that y'all took a lot of this information and are inspired to want to go make your own. Any tips with dealing with broken thread partly through the line of stitching? So I actually had that happen when I was doing the USA and the star. I think I had it happen like 4 times. I was being stubborn, and I knew I needed to change my needle. I had done those rows of ribbon stitches, and I was like, I need to change my needle, but I didn't. You should change your needle every 8 hours or less of sewing or every new project. But I conveniently always broke thread on the stars. So I was able to start at the beginning. I know it doesn't always happen like that. What you could do is, if it's at the very beginning, if it's not far in, you could take the stitches out. You could start over in that way. You could get a scrap piece of fabric and start sewing from the beginning that stitch and where it ended. I mean, it's kind of like Frankensteining it together in a way. You could start sewing that stitch on a scrap piece of fabric. Once it gets to the point where you think it broke, stop your machine, cut your thread, pull it out, and then put your fabric, if it's a long strip like this and you don't want to start over, put your fabric back underneath it and line it up. But I will say the only time I broke a thread on this entire thing, y'all, and there's a lot of stitching on this, the only time was on these letters, and it was because I needed to change my needle. So if you are starting this project, change your needle. Or if you do a bunch of ribbon stitches, these ribbon stitches took me quite a while. I'm not sure what I was thinking when I was like, let me do 2 rows of double ribbon stitches. It won't take that long. It took me quite a while. So keep that in mind if you choose a more fancy stitch. But I didn't break a thread at all. I don't go full speed either. That can cause your thread to break more often and it not be a needle because you have that friction and that heat going. And you also just want to make sure you have the right needle for the thread that you're using. So lots of different tips that you can use there. So if there's not anything else, again, thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time. Thank you.